Welcome once again. Here we are talking about the dark night of the soul with Dr. Jon Paulien of Loma University. After the introduction that we shared earlier, I would like to get a little bit deeper into this concept of the dark night of the soul. And I would like to ask this question. Is the dark night of the soul the equivalent of the funeral or the death of one's ego?
I suppose it would be nice if it were that simple. Give me a dark night of the soul, and then the pride is gone, and I'm melded into the character of God from that moment on. I think one thing I've seen in the research and in my own experience is that dark nights tend to be progressive. I mean, in some cases, like Mother Teresa, it can be a 20-year-long thing that happens. I think in most cases, it might be experienced multiple times. I know in Jesus' life, it was at least twice. You think of the temptation in the wilderness and then also Gethsemane,
Yes.
2 points at which he was deeply stressed spiritually and emotionally, etc. There may have been other experiences. I mean, I think of John 17, where he's in the upper room. This is before Gethsemane. In fact, there is no Gethsemane in the Gospel of John. But Jesus' Gethsemane occurs in chapter 12 and in chapter 17, where you have, particularly chapter 12, I think, where you have Jesus under some stress as he's observing something happening in his experience, and it calls to mind things that are coming. So I think Dark Night of the Soul is not necessarily a singular thing, and for some people it may be relatively small things over and over again. And I think when we get to my own experience, you'll see it wasn't one thing. It was a series of things over multiple years, and that there are some things outside of my dark night that you could have called dark night as well, but it just wasn't yet at the level that I think of when I think of a dark night of the soul.
If one is feeling very low, one is feeling like Jesus, my God, why have you forsaken me? Are you really real? What would you say to someone that goes through this experience, someone that once was a believer, a preacher of the truth of the gospel, and now feels like everything I've believed means absolutely nothing to me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the one thing I would say is if you're serious about your walk with God, this is normal. This will come to you at some point in some form, and maybe many times over. And so the point I really, that's so important for even talking about this is just to recognize this is one of the tools that God uses to shape us in the direction that He wants to lead us. I like to think, based on Hebrews chapter 2, that God has important plans for the human race after this conflict is over. That God created the human race as a race more like God than any other creature, more like God than the angels. And that God's purpose was, after a period of training and maturation, that human beings would be co-rulers of the universe. Hebrews 2, verses 5 to 9 states that pretty explicitly. There are hints of it in, kings and priests and other things that are hints of it in Revelation and other places. But that plan means that human beings do need education, do need training, and the dark night of the soul, in the context of a cosmic conflict, is one of the best ways God has to provide that growth and development that we need. And I would argue, and maybe I'm in the minority on this, But I would argue that many, many Christians die without being fully mature spiritually. Many Christians die at a pre-dark night state, etc. And I think that growth doesn't stop at the second coming. There isn't a magic wand that now you're this perfect person, no ego or anything. I think uh, God saves those who are safe to save, knowing that they will cooperate with
Yes,
Him in growing to where He wants them to be. So I see the millennium as 1,000 years of healing.
absolutely.
It
The
says
scripture
that in
actually said that he will wipe away their tears.
Yeah, yeah. And that's at the end of the millennium. He
Mhm.
wipes away the tears. So there's going to be tears in the millennium. And the
Yes,
tree of life is for the healing of the
healing.
nations, the healing of hurts, the healing. I mean, so much of our political conversation is driven by victimhood.
Yes,
You know, you feed on the stories where your tribe, your family, your race, your nation has been treated badly in the
Mhm.
past, and that then justifies anger, hatred,
Mhm.
etc., in the present because it was done to you earlier. And with that in mind, I think there's likely to be. I mean, imagine in the new Earth a concentration camp guard meeting uh, one of the
The
victims
victims.
of the gas chamber. I mean, imagine that moment. Is there going to be a need for some reconciliation, some healing, some forgiveness? I think so.
Absolutely.
Anyway, that's just that.
Um,
That's my little heresy on this. Yeah.
I find myself in the same minority as you are. One would argue that a concentration camp guard will never make it to the new earth. What would you say to those that think like that?
Well, I think God is able to save, beyond what we can imagine. Actually, I was just in Auschwitz a week or so ago,
Mm,
and someone raised the question: Why would anybody work here?
mm.
Who can do that kind of work without being destroyed inside, etc. And the guide pointed out, well, she says they didn't have a choice.
Mm,
She says the choice was do this kind of work or go to the Eastern Front where death and dismemberment is almost guaranteed within a couple of months. If Most of us are never faced with those kind of choices, but if you're faced with that kind of a choice, this may seem like the only safe way forward, and it's horrible and it does horrible things. And I'm not assuming that there'll be guards in large quantity there, but I can
absolutely.
also imagine that God, knowing the heart, recognizing the difficult choices that brought a person there, may recognize some things that we didn't also see. There's an amazing true story that was made into a movie called The Pianist.
Yes, I've watched
This
it.
may help with that.
Mhm,
In The Pianist, this is the Warsaw Ghetto,
mhm.
and the pianist is one of the last survivors hiding out in the ghetto. And he was a famous concert pianist before the war. And he finds a piano in the bombed out building that he's sort of hiding in, and he's doing his thing, and all of a sudden he looks up, and there's a Nazi soldier standing there, and they just have a little conversation. This is a true story, by the way. They have a conversation. Your penis, play for me, and he goes to the piano and begins to play some of the pieces that he had before, and that German soldier is moved by that. And knowing that he's a Jew and knowing that he's hiding in the attic, he turns that into his headquarters because he's actually the commandant
Yes.
of the ones that are searching out the Jews in that area.
Mhm.
And he provides food and shelter and covers for him and everything. And it's kind of like you find out later on that he's the commandant. the one who's been in charge of
Yes.
destroying the ghetto. And yet there's something in him that's touched by this pianist, and he does the kind of things that Schindler did for
Mm.
one person. How that looks to God, I leave to God, you know. But I mean, that's a true story that actually occurred, and so it shows the humanity. And I'm reminded of Darrell Davis, who is a African American musician who felt called by God at one point in his life to reach out to the Ku Klux Klan, to the leaders of the Ku Klux Klan, and seek to build understanding. And he would argue everyone, including the worst person you can imagine, wants to be understood, wants to be heard, wants to be loved, wants the same things for their family that everyone else wants for their family. So there's a lot of things, a lot of common interests that you can talk about. And as a result of Davis's work, dozens of leaders of the Ku Klux Klan have left that organization and have changed in their attitudes toward blacks and Jews and so forth. So yeah, we're into deep weeds here in terms of who God can save and who He can't. But I believe in a God who is merciful beyond our understanding of mercy, and a God who does not want anyone to be lost. I mean, there's some people we all want to be lost, right? We don't want to deal with them in eternity,
Yes.
but many of them are going to be there, and we'll have to deal with it. So, yeah, that's why 1,000 years may be needed to overcome the hurts and the slights and the
and
challenges of this life.
and then the rest of the eternity. I love this God that you are presenting, and I think this God needs to be preached about more often, even in our churches, Christian churches. Nowadays, since you are researching a lot and writing a lot about the Armageddon, let's for the because I want to use the opportunity of having you on the program. Um, the conflict that is happening as we speak now in the Middle East, which is expanding, apparently, geographically speaking, um, I have a feeling that to some of us, this is a great opportunity to share God to everyone, and I'm not going to say names.
Mhm.
And I'd like to believe that the dark night of the soul of Gaza, the dark night of the soul of Haifa, yeah, or even Tehran. Those are opportunities whereby God can show his love and mercy, not through politicians, not through statesmen, but through regular people like you and I. I am sure that some of these individuals will watch this program. What would you say to them?
Wow. You see, people. I'm the director of the Center for Understanding World Religions at Loma University, and we've been under pressure to make some kind of statement about Gaza. And we have Palestinians on our board, we have Jews on our board. I mean, and I was never able to come to that because I didn't know what I could say
Mm-hmm.
that wouldn't do more harm than good. And that's a real challenge at a time like this. All sides in the Middle East have a credible victim story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Palestinians in Gaza certainly have victim story after victim story. But the Israelis have the victim story of all victim stories in the Holocaust.
Yes.
So, how do you speak to all of that? And I think at first one can only listen
Mm-hmm.
and commiserate with the reality that people are experiencing,
Mm-hmm.
the absolute reality that people are experiencing, and to understand it as far as possible through their eyes. And at some point in that conversation, recognizing that your victimhood is holding you with chains that are making your life even more miserable. I forget who it was that said that most of the suffering in our lives comes from within rather than from without. That may not be 100% true for the typical Palestinian in Gaza, but I think a lot of that is true, that we compound our outside suffering with internal suffering. That as you review the hurts of the past, etc., as you go over this stuff and over this stuff and over this stuff, it holds you in chains. The other person may not even know that you are suffering from these thoughts. So you're not hurting them by your continual recycling of the victimization. The only way out of that cycle is forgiveness. And the greatest example of forgiveness, of course, is Jesus Christ. Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. It is only as we forgive that we can break the chains of the past and free ourselves to be the person God wants us to be. So that's a hard saying for somebody who's been through the most intense imaginable suffering. But at the right moment, over time, after trust has been built, to ask the question, have you ever thought about forgiving that person or those people? And why would you? And to realize that you are imprisoning yourself into suffering even more intense than anything that you've gone through.
Right.
And, do it for you. Don't do it for them. They may never know that you've forgiven them. They may not want to be forgiven. They may not think they need to be forgiven. They were just following orders,
Yeah.
But you need to forgive for yourself.
Nelson Mandela, famous say, well, I don't forgive because they deserve it. I forgive because I deserve peace. Now, to kind of wrap up this section here, what would you say to people like you and I who are spectators? We are not directly involved. I see a lot of opinions being thrown right, left, and center. A lot of even preachers, famous preachers in the United States, siding one way or another. As a Christian, what our attitude should be towards what's happening in the Middle East now as we speak?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think to recognize that the number one task is to learn the heart of God and to know that God is deeply pained by all this suffering. You think of the story of Job. God is deeply pained by our suffering. That doesn't necessarily come out so strongly in Job, but it comes out in other parts of Scripture. My heart breaks within me. You have places in the Old Testament where God weeps for the enemies, weeps for Babylon, weeps for Moab, enemies of Israel, of the slaughter that took place when Israel defended itself, etc. So God is deeply, connected in heart to every human being's experience. And so I think the first task of the Christian is to open one's heart to God, and then to be open to the heart of those that you may think are in the wrong in any given situation. I think that that's the fundamental task.
Absolutely. I have a question that I would like to address it now, and then we will answer it in the next episode. This is the question. Our attitude towards all kinds of conflicts, but because this is now happening during our own time, the attitude towards this conflict is dependent on which stage of your faith journey you are. If you've been through the dark night of the soul, it's likely that you would have that forgiving attitude and more understanding, rather than somebody that is only beginning this journey and he's passionate about one side or another. So let's talk about this in our next section.
Very well said. Let's do it.